Welcome to Convince Me in 15 Minutes, where we give our guests 15 minutes to convince us about timely topics in the financial services industry. Before we begin, please subscribe below. The Convince Me in 15 Minutes podcast will introduce you to new concepts, theories, philosophies, and practices in the financial services industry. Your guides are Luke Tawas and Keith Thompson. We'll follow up the initial presentation with questions. So again, subscribe below and we'll introduce our guest speaker.
All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Keenan. I am here to convince you within 15 minutes that this little mindset you have that people buy from people they like and trust is bullshit. That this idea that you got to build rapport and that you got to get people to like you and that you got to build relationships to sell or be a good salesperson is absolute bunk. It's a myth, and you've been taught the wrong thing, and it actually pisses buyers off. It makes you look inauthentic. It makes you look smarmy and salesy because they know exactly what you're trying to do. They don't need friends, and you trying to be their friend only upsets them because they understand the motive. The motive isn't because they like you. The motive isn't because they think you're cool. The motive is because they're trying to get you to let your guard down so that you'll buy shit from them. And the minute you buy shit from them, they're gone. So this idea that you think it's about like and trust and it's about relationships and it's about likability is wrong. And I'm here to convince you why. So let me start with how it works. People don't buy from people that they like. They couldn't care less. Okay? I will agree people buy from people they trust. Trust is a critical element, but trust is not something that you need to try to build. It does not need to be an objective. Trust should happen by simply being your authentic self and by simply understanding that you're there to help. If you lead with your selling approach is, I'm there to help, the buyer will quickly understand that you are trustworthy. So that part is easy. And you don't need to be trustworthy by asking them what school they went to. Like, oh, I see you went to the University of Colorado. Oh, that's cool. My aunt went there, blah, blah, blah. No, you don't need to do that. Now, I'll give you all a little wiggle room. Obviously, in the Western culture, when you first get on a call, whether you're selling or not, we bullshit. So you can bullshit. Naturally, authentically bullshit. Don't try to connect, just be yourself. Now, if you happen to went to the University of Colorado and they went to, great, that's a legitimate one. Hey, no shit, you're above me too. Oh, that's awesome. But do not try to fabricate your rapport. You look like an asshat. So let me break it down for you what really, really matters in a sale. That's providing value. Buyers buy on value. They do not buy on likability. So I want everybody here to envision a 4-quadrant matrix. Okay. On the y-axis, I want you to imagine likability. So if you're looking at it in your mind, on the left side, going up and down is likability. The top of it is, yes, I like my salesperson. On the bottom is, no, I don't. Then I want you to imagine on the x-axis, I want you to imagine value. And I want you to imagine on the left side, in the bottom left corner, no value. Going across the bottom to the right side, I want you to imagine tons of value. Now draw your little X in the middle. Okay? If somebody doesn't like you and they perceive you as bringing no value, the bottom left box, you ain't selling shit to anybody. Period. As a matter of fact, they're going to tell you to fuck off. Go away. Like, I don't like you, and you're bringing me no value, so beat it. Pound sand, get out of here, okay? So no one's selling anybody, so clearly you don't want to be in that box. But then I want you to think about the top right quadrant, where that's foot to the right, tons of value, you're offering tons of value, and they like you. Hey, if you could get there, that's great. That feels good, that's awesome, that's great. But you don't have to get there. But that is, yes, I will buy from you, and let's go have a beer. Now, when I look at all my clients and customers that I work with, I would say, I don't know, 10% of them, I'm in that category, about 10%. Some of them actually have become friends now. So for whatever reason, we hit it off. I provided tons of value. My organization provided tons of value, and they liked us. So it's like, yeah, let's do this, and let's go have a beer. It's great. But that is not the majority of people. Okay? Now, let's go to the top left box. I like my sales manager, I like my salesperson, right? I'm a buyer. I like my salesperson. They're awesome. Top left. But the bottom there, that's in the, I don't see any value. So that's a polite no. It's just a polite no. No, I'm not going to buy what you're selling. I think you're a great guy. You're funny, Keenan. You're obnoxious. I mean, you're obnoxious, but it's funny. I like hanging out with you. You're a blast. But you offer no value. I ain't buying. I'm not buying. Nobody buys anything from anybody just because they like them. They don't do it. Now, let's go down to the bottom right box. That is tons of value, no likey. They don't like you, but you offer tons of value. They will buy. People will buy if they don't like you, if there's value. People are selfish, and I could prove it all day long. Now, I'll break down the myth because I know what some people are thinking, but if I don't like you, but you're selling me something and it's going to make my life better and it's the best thing out there and it's going to provide massive amounts of value, I don't need to like you. I do not need to like you at all. What I need to do is trust that what you're selling me is going to work, and that can be done through credibility, not likability. So the real concept of this is you want to sell on credibility. You want your buyers to understand that you know how to solve their problems, that you understand the current states that they're struggling with, you understand the problems and impacts they're dealing with, and you understand what happens if they don't change. And if they do change, you understand what they want to change to and why that will make a difference and why it matters. If you understand all that and you make a recommendation to them that is going to make that come to fruition, you will have credibility and you will have a relationship built on credibility and you'll be providing value. And that's all you need to sell is value. That's it. And that value can come through credibility. So technically speaking, okay, if you want to build a relationship on credibility, have at it all day. Beautiful. Building rapport, trying to be like is crushing you. It shouldn't happen. And it needs to stop because you look inauthentic and people don't want to buy from someone who won't buy from simply because they like them. It's just a fact. And now, some people say, well, what if all things about the product are exactly the same and the only thing you have is your personality? I was like, well, get a new job because I don't see how that company's going to last much longer. Because technically speaking, every single product on the market that sells more than, I'm going to make up a number, $1 million a year. And if you work for someone smaller, we can have a side conversation. But if you work for a company that has revenue of over $1 million a year, there is clearly some differentiation in your buyers' minds that's based on value. Clearly. Absolutely. Now, let's say you're selling paper. What is that? Scranton, PA, the office. What's the name of that? Dunder and Miffler or some shit like that, right? They're selling paper. So I got it. Dunder and Miffler, thank you. The two pieces of paper are exactly the same. So then you are not selling paper. If the paper is exactly the same, you're not selling paper. Your value sits somewhere else. It could sit in price. It could sell in service. It could sell in inventory management. Who knows? But you got to know what you sell, what the value is, and how you apply that value. You should never be trying to use your personality to be the differentiator, to create likability, to get them to buy. So no more rapport, no more personality, no more trying to connect, no more mirroring. Oh my God, no more mirroring. Please, for the love of God, no more mirroring. Okay? Be your authentic self and drive credibility. And that's how you win, creating value.
That's fantastic. So the old adage of they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care is hooey. Is that what you're telling us?
No, because it depends on where you're targeting the care. I like where you're going with this. It's not how much I care about you per se. It's how much I care about what you're dealing with. Right? So when you think about likability, that's a one-to-one. That's like, Keith, do you like me? I don't know if you like me. You might think I'm too much. You might think I'm too loud. I swear too much. I'm not religious. I don't give a fuck. But I'm not going to worry about that. That's not what I should be worried about, whether or not you like me. What I really want to be worried about is, do you perceive me as somebody that can solve your problem? And whether or not we have any connections politically or school-wise or sports-wise or anything is immaterial, or even personality is immaterial. The real question comes down to, do you believe that I can help you solve a problem? And if you do, then you are going to be interested in working with me. If you don't, regardless of how cool, fun, exciting you think I am and how much we have fun golfing together, you're not going to buy a damn thing.
So, Keenan, I know you've written several books. I believe most of them were published prior to the pandemic. there any plans to write something new or any interesting tidbits you can share with us post-pandemic and how things might have changed?
From a selling perspective, other than the process of Outbound, which has turned into a shit show. Okay. Outbound has turned into an absolute shit show. We have inundated buyers. We have over-indexed on emails and cold calling because we've made it so easy to do. Buyers have just shut down. They don't connect anymore, right? And I would argue to a certain degree, to their demise as much as ours, right? Like to the extent that they may have a problem that needs to be solved, they're just so resistant to engaging with salespeople, particularly from an outbound perspective, that problems could persist or they don't solve problems they didn't realize they had because there was no one to help show them that they were struggling with something. They didn't get introduced to something new because they're just so resistant to anybody coming into their world because we have just absolutely horrifically wasted their time with countless calls, countless emails, email drip campaigns that are just absolutely useless as tits on a bowl. They're invasive, they're annoying, they're self-serving. And so they're shutting down. They're not responding, they're not connecting, they're not deleting, they're not thinking, they're just basically shutting everything down. And like anything else, if you go that far, if we start, I mean, it's probably a horrible example, but some people are arguing that all the filtering we do with water, we're actually hurting ourselves now. We've gone too far. You know what I'm saying? We filter it, and now we're not letting some of the microbes and other things that our body actually could use. So in an effort to get rid of the bad, we're getting rid of the good. Same thing with this. So I think the Outbound's a shit show. But outside of that, as far as anything that's changed after COVID, no, the concept of selling has not changed. And the concept of selling, true selling, which we're still learning as sales organizations and as sales experts how to do, but true selling has not changed. And I believe this is why gap selling is being perceived so well in the marketplace. It's done the best job to actually highlight what selling is all about. Okay? Selling is really the concept of influencing change. We need to get rid of the concept of selling or stop selling and stop saying, hey, I've got this you need to buy. And by stepping back and saying, hey, where are you right now? Are you comfortable where you are? Is this where you need to be? Are there negative ramifications of your current state that you no longer want to absorb, deal with, or accept? And if so, I could help you transition to a better place. That is what selling is really about. And when you look at selling like that, that will never change. That will never, ever, ever, ever change as long as humans are built psychologically as we are now. And that's why so many people come to me and say things like, dude, I use gap selling with my kids. I use gap selling to push a new idea through my company. I use gap selling to get a job. Well, that's good. You understand the concept. It's not, selling is simply about the transition from an undesired, intolerable, untenable position or state or being or place to a new one. It's about change. And that will never change in sales because it's rooted in psychology.
So we had a guest, gentleman named Dennis Mosley Williams, on recently, who said in an increasingly commoditized world, whether it's financial services or B2B sales with software, that we're moving from this commoditized world to an experience economy where it's less about the product and more about the experience. Do you buy into that concept, or does that go hand in glove with some of the things you're talking about?
So it depends on what the experience is. So if the experience is going to improve my current state, or I'll go one step further, the lack of experience in my current environment now is creating some level of problems and impacts that I cannot live with, that are not untenable, that do not support my desired outcomes, then yes, he's 100% correct. If not, then no. See, notice, I think the guy's smart from what I heard you say, but this is what most sales experts miss. It is not about the product. It is not about the service. It's not about the experience or lack of experience. It's not about any of that. It is stepping all the way back and saying, how well can I assess where people are today? And then what am I able to do to help them transition if transition is required? Right? It's in many ways, it's super simple, but people overcomplicate it.
But Keenan, how do you establish credibility to be able to be that voice to the person that has a problem?
Okay, so I think it's situational. So give me, which type of situation would you think I need to create the credibility?
Well, like one of the things you just mentioned was in regards to outbound post-COVID is an absolute disaster. So if you're picking up the phone and I'm calling you and saying, "Hi, Keenan, this is Luke," how do I establish that credibility so you'll actually give me 2 to 5 or even 20 minutes of your time?
Okay, well, I think the first one, from picking up the phone, never look for 20 minutes. All your job is to get them to agree to meet to another time. Yes. But outside of that, it's your understanding of the space of the person you're calling, right? At as minute detail as possible, so that you can ask a question about, are you experiencing this? I don't move my money into anything else than my company. I bet 100% on me, right? Now, if that is common for investors, if that's common for business owners like myself, yet it's not completely prudent for some reason I don't know, right? And I am in the financial industry selling to people like myself, I might say, "Hey, Keenan, are you the type of investor who puts 99% of his money back into his own company because you feel investing on yourself is the only way to go? If yes, I think I could show you a few ways that is hurting you that you might not be aware of." Why would that be hurting me? That doesn't make sense, right? I might give that person on that call, "All right, I'll give you 3 minutes to explain why. And if you can walk through those 3 minutes and get my attention, I'll give you more time." Right? Because what you've just done is you're not trying to sell me a product. What you're doing is you're highlighting or trying to get me to see my existing scenario differently. Right? And you started with recognizing that people like myself don't make investments. Like, I don't have a 401k. I don't have any of that because I literally sit there and say, "Okay, I'm making this up. I got $250,000 that I can move over to some investment account. And if I'm lucky and smart, I'll make 8 to 9%, right? Or I take that $250,000, I invest it in 2 more employees, or I invest it in this here and that there. And if I'm more lucky, I'll probably double or triple that money within a year and a half." You see what I'm saying? So for me, I don't have a whole lot of personal investment accounts because I just keep doubling down on my business. Now, I have been asking in my head, when is that threshold that, okay, I need to diversify now? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, okay, I'm at XYZ level. I should now start putting some money elsewhere. I don't need to invest that fast. So anyways, that's all the stuff that someone needs to be thinking who's selling in that. Think about your buyer. And when you ask questions like that and you think like your buyer, you gain credibility by your knowledge. And believe it or not, everybody listening, pay the fuck attention to what I'm about to say, because for some reason, Westerners can't get this shit. You can earn credibility through questions. You don't always have to tell to get credibility. You can get credibility through questions.
So with somebody like yourself,
learn to get credibility through questions.
Let's stay in that same framework of maybe somebody in the financial services industry calling you, knowing that you're a business owner. You have to have a framework of what you think that path is going to be before I call you. I have to know I'm calling you as a businessman. I've got to know that the typical businessman does not invest because he invests in his own business. So I have to have that framework going into that, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
100%. And I talk about it in the book.
Well, I was going to say, can you highlight maybe a section from your book where you kind of, because every business is different. Every business has a unique product, service, what have you. So you have to be able to have that framework of what are the questions that I need to ask and what are the problems that I need to get to. Is that a universal thing?
So that second piece. So in the book, I have something called the problem identification chart. And basically what I ask business owners to do, or in our case, corporations, you sit down and say, okay, what are the business problems you solve? Not what business problems you think they have, because that's infinite. What business problems do you solve? And watch this. This really fucks with people, you guys. Most companies or products only solve about 2 or 3. I've bumped into a couple 4 or 5, but never more than that. Never. Okay, now, a Unilever, they could solve millions, but that's because they have a million brands. So I would never do a pick for the whole company. You just go down to each brand, right? But within that, you very rarely does any product, service, or anything solve more than about 2 or 3 or 4 business problems. So you start with the business problems and you identify those, and then you identify in the separate column, what are the impacts? So should that business problem exist, how does that impact that buyer, company, person's life, business, etc.? And that can be infinite, but you target the biggest, most obvious, painful ones. Then you go to the next column and you ask yourself, what are the root causes? What causes those business problems to exist in the first place? And those also can be infinite, but like a bell curve, 80% are always the same or the biggest, so you write those down. Once you have this, you simply target that in your marketing, in your cold calling, in your conversations. You just target that and you try to get the buyer or customer to say, yeah, I have that. That is accurate.
What I was going to say earlier is that even in our industry, I find that some financial advisors specialize in a very deep way. For example, they work with dentists. They specialize in, all of a sudden, not just providing financial advice to dentists, but also working with them to, purchase buildings for their practices and then finance equipment. And it's not just about investing the money, but being holistic. Or you have financial advisors who specialize with, women divorcees, as an example. Those types of specializations, I think, give you credibility, which then allows you to go much deeper. And I think that's ultimately what you're saying, Keenan, is that you have to have credibility to sell.
Yes. Your job is not to sell, it's to help. You can't help without credibility.
Well, I was going to say, I think there's a difference in terms of questions that are either probing or it's almost like, if you're an attorney and you've got a case, there's a discovery process where I gather all that information before I even start asking questions. So I need to have some of that information before I can ask questions, because my questions to you can't be, hey, Keenan, tell me about your business, because you're going to say, I'm not in the business of educating you on my business, right? I've got stuff to do myself. Mm-hmm. So what's kind of the pre-work that needs to be done to make sure that those questions that you're asking are the right questions and the probing questions that will elicit enough interest to have them kind of get that second meeting.
So again, it's going to be situational. So have I already agreed to meet you, or is this a cold call again?
I just called you out of the blue, but let's assume I did some homework. I know the nature of what your business is. And now I've got to ask you those questions that kind of prompt enough either discomfort or intrigue where you say, hey, I might actually want to continue this conversation with this guy.
Yeah. So that's where the pick would come in. So I want you to imagine you solve XYZ problem, right? And you have that in your pick chart. This problem. You go to the root cause section and there should be a whole bunch of reasons that problem exists, right? So it's hard for me outside of finance, but I might know that a root cause of a problem is too much in financing costs. I might know that, right? So I may not know you're having it, but I know that people in your space, this is the set of problems they have. It's like being a doctor. I know that someone who's a high red meat diet that doesn't exercise. I want to ask about cholesterol right away. Now, I may not know if you have high cholesterol and you may not have high cholesterol, but I do know that as my target market, you eat a lot of red meat and you don't exercise, you're probably whatchamacallit. Now, let's go a step back further. Let's say I don't even know you eat a lot of red meat, but I see you and you look a little bit larger. First question, tell me about your diet. Right? First question, because you're a doctor, so I'm afforded something. I'm a doctor. So as a finance person, I'm afforded some high-level questions, right? I mean, now if it's cold out of the blue, then you make the statement. You make the statement based on the root causes. Right? So I know that I'm talking to a business owner. I know I'm talking to a 55-year-old man who appears visually anyways to be anywhere between 30 and 60 pounds overweight, that I know what root cause questions I can ask pretty quickly that will not be considered disrespectful, that could demonstrate I know what's going on and they know where I'm going. The person listening knows where I'm going with this. I'm talking to a doctor, okay? So they're going to afford you some conversation. If it's completely cold, yeah, you got to get right at it. You got to just basically make a statement. Say, hey, we work with business owners like yourself who may have struggled with, and you go to your root causes, which then relates to or creates this. There's your problem, which in the end creates this. There's your impacts. If that sounds familiar, or I usually like to say, is that something you've experienced? And if they say no, then I go from there and keep asking. If they say yes, I go a different direction.
I just want you to know I'm a little bit hurt that you assumed I was 30 pounds overweight and I eat red meat, but
I never said Keith, by the way, just for the record. Just for the record.
Anyway, Luke, you got something?
This has been fantastic. Maybe can you share with everybody where they can find out a little bit more information about what you do in your company, if that's of interest?
Yeah, you can get the book, Gap Selling. You can get it on our website, salesgrowth.com. You can get it on Amazon. You can find me on LinkedIn, where I post a lot. Oh, I've been a little quiet lately. I got to turn that back up. You can find me on Instagram at Keenan_red plaid. So I'm not too hard to find.
Well, Keenan, we can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us today. We're happy to inform you you are apparently a top voice, so that's information you didn't know.
I did not know.
But look, I think this is information that's useful. I don't care what industry you're in. I don't care whether it's financial services, if you're selling paper, if you're selling widgets. I think that oftentimes, people that have been in the sales business for a long time have always worked under the kind of the understanding that, you got to like me to do business with me. And I think dispelling some of these myths is really important for some of the people that are listening to this. So again, thank you so very much for joining us. I look forward to reading your book and look to have you back on the show again as time permits.
I love it. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks again, King.